So the piece that I was supposed to summarize and critique was Sarah Peters' Journey to Positive Peace, The Fight for Cultural Development, Economic Prosperity. And it begins with discussing um, the wars that have gone on and the difference between positive peace and negative peace. And she offers up the Merriam-Webster dif- dic- dictionary definition, and that is that peace is a state of tranquility or quiet, or the freedom from civil disturbance, and it is a state of security or order within a community provided for law or custom. And she cites Johann Galtung and his work in regards to that. Um, and then it kind of talks about the negative peace as being the absence of violence, and positive peace, which is, as she put it, filled with positive content such as restorations of relationships, the creation of social systems that serve the needs of the whole population, and the constructive resolution of conflict. And I think that that's interesting that it points out the difference between the two, and that makes for a good beginning to the essay. And then later, it kind of is transferred into speaking about the 2016 election, and I thought that it offered up some good analysis of what happened with, you know, Donald Trump winning. But I don't know that the two topics are necessarily completely related. I mean, I get that she's making the connection between, well, like, the riots and the protests that have arisen as a result of Trump being elected. However, I don't know that they're all necessarily related to the topic of peace per se. Um, and then, like, later on, it's pointed out that um, Senator John McCain has, according to her, been in the Senate for 30 years, and by her calculation, has made, I think she said, almost $5 million, which, obviously that is a lot. But again, I don't know that that's necessarily pertinent to the point of peace, the difference between positive and negative peace, that is. Um, and then, acknowledging that the Electoral College, in her view, is unjust and isn't right. But in a way, I mean, that was what our country was founded on, was the basis of that system being there to protect the smaller states and their interests. Um, and I think I even saw something which is kind of unrelated, but that Senator Barbara Boxer proposed legislation yesterday to get rid of the Electoral College. But anyway, and then she talks about the Flint, Michigan water crisis and isn't so sure that Trump is going to actually do anything about it as president, which, again, I don't see the necessarily relation between that and peace. But, sorry. And then I did think that her speaking about the African issues in regards to their sex education and overpopulation was interesting, because I think that goes back to the issue of, in peace times, what do countries do for their citizens and what can they expect? And I thought that was good. Um, and then, like, the conclusion to the essay about, you know, that it's a push for civil rights, and she pushes to end racism, which obviously is something I can support as well. I just don't see that going as well with the main topic that she initially chose, from what I followed. And I think that they're all very good ideas. I just don't find the grouping to be very, um, that I don't think it flows very well, but that it's all very good separate. Um, but going back to the part which, just the piece, I think that was the strongest point. And because, I mean, I get that peace, the point that she's making is that peace, a just peace, is aspirations for human rights, economic fairness and opportunity, democratization, and environmental well being and sustainability, as she cited on page 5. But I think that maybe you were talking about the election too much and not focusing enough on that. I don't know. I think maybe another way to go about it would be maybe bring stuff up that's not as recent, perhaps, like Martin Luther King Jr.'s effort for um, civil rights and their freedom, instead of focusing so much on the current situation between Trump and his naysayers. Um, because I don't think that's necessarily, I don't know, I think it's just too recent, really, to be seen in the lens of peace. Um, but I did find your personal anecdote about, let me find it, your family and Trump to be interesting, and I do think that really resonates with the topic of peace, which again, I think maybe referencing Trump this soon may not be the best because there's not as much in regards to peace, maybe that can go with. Anyway, where you said about Trump's stance on illegal immigration and your stepfather, and then that your brother, or excuse me, your sister is 10 years old and has Down syndrome and has seen Trump's remarks in regards to people with disabilities and the ad that Clinton and others were running about, mocking the reporter with disabilities. I think that was really good, and I think that is, that goes with what you're saying pretty well, because that just goes back to, the peace and things that you would say and wouldn't say to kind of get people to get along and agree with each other. Um, and I think the obviously things that he has said, for example, the reporter with disabilities, that isn't something you would say if you're trying to achieve actual peace. And like you said at the beginning, positive peace theorists believe that in order to achieve peace, positive peace must reach a certain level of economic prosperity. And I I can see your point there. Um, but yeah, I think overall it's a good essay. I just think that some parts may not necessarily flow as well with your general topic, and I feel like you have two topics maybe you're talking about in a way, kind of like just the positive negative piece, and then Trump's election and what can be expected to come as a result of it. And again, I mean, I do see the correlation in places with the piece, but maybe they're not as clear as would be recommended. Um, but and then you speak later in parts about abortion and birth control, and that goes back into your topic of the positive piece, I guess, because that would be them being able to provide for themselves and developmental issues and their situation. But yeah, so again, I think it was a good essay, and it was enjoyable to read, and I think you really have some strong opinions, and it was enjoyable. But I do think some parts may not necessarily have flown quite the way you would have wanted in regards to the topic that you had chosen. But overall, it was good.